about. So we'll keep everything else in the quarantine that falls out. Sorry, we'll release everything from the quarantine which falls outside that. And as the time moves on, we start to write down to something more specific. In this case, we're saying it's a file with price in the file name. We can get to the point where we released everything from the quarantine except those items which are more likely to be this outbreak. And in the end, we'll ultimately provide a detailed signature from the security intelligence operation and provide an affirmative filter against that remaining quarantined item. So again, this is a head start on malware vendors. So some malware vendors might take up to, we reckon about 13-hour lead time. So by the time malware vendors have seen an outbreak globally and turned around a signature for that outbreak, we can have used our outbreak filters and block that and have about 13-hour lead time against those vendors. So a very powerful mechanism and heavily deployed by customer financial institutions. Get that in a bit more detail graphically. So the security intelligence operation is providing that targeted attack threat filter down to the IronPort appliance, where it's examining things and putting them in the dynamic quarantine as it needs to. We can have a release on that quarantine. So Cisco may say, let's leave this item in the quarantine 4 hours until we get an updated signature for that item, so we can scan it again and then release it from the quarantine when we're happy it's clear. But you can override those settings should you choose to. So that's down to the individual customer. Though we recommend letting the security intelligence operation take control of that out filter mechanism and provide best practice. We can also block the mail or drop it, but still send messages onto the user. We could drop the message completely or append a message onto a header onto the message to the user and tell the user that this message was identified as a potential threat. Have knowledge of the different threat levels. We have threat categories as well, and an explanation to the end user as to what threat it may pose. So something which is definitely malicious coming into your network, we'll probably drop that immediately. If something falls into that area, again, you may quarantine it, or you may ultimately release it to the end user and tell them to proceed with caution. And that's what these messages are all about. So we can automatically create signatures which educate the end user and tell them, for example, that this is particularly a phishing mail and maybe dangerous, so proceed with extreme caution. Some secure organizations might just block these altogether and just send the header to the user without the message attached to it. And they may have to call an administrator to examine that message and release it, but that's right down to an organizational policy. Something I've recently introduced into the email solution is the ability to redirect suspicious URLs. So if with a URL in an email, again, the security intelligence operation can provide dynamic information to the IronPort appliance, which will make the email appliance append the URL in the email with a link which will push the URL up to the ScanSafe cloud. So ScanSafe is the cloud-based web filtering service within Cisco. For example, a user receives an email from a trusted source which gets right through to their inbox, but there's a URL in that email. They click on that URL and be sent straight out to a malicious site which may have malware present on there. So if it's compromising your network, a benign URL leads to damage. What we do here is, again, a link onto that URL so that when the user clicks on that link, they're pushed automatically to the ScanSafe cloud, and the ScanSafe will scan the content at the remote site or have knowledge of the content at the remote site, its reputation, whether it's a good or bad site, and allow or block that transaction up to the site. So the user, should I say, doesn't have an awareness that they've been sent to the ScanSafe cloud, but they will be blocked if that's malicious content. If the safe outcome is that it's a good site, well, the user will just be forwarded to the site as they would have been anyway, and have no knowledge they're being pushed through the ScanSafe cloud. So that's the way in which I mentioned through an architectural approach, we're tying together individual solutions to augment the security that we can provide to end users from a content point of view. Look at content security. A number of mechanisms for providing malicious content filtering through our web appliance. And again, the web appliance may sit on of your firewall. Any user transactions or web requests will be can be automatically pushed through to the web proxy. The user may know that they're behind a proxy. They could be configured in a transparent way so that the user doesn't even know they're going through a proxy. But there are a number of mechanisms here which will determine or keep your user safe from malicious content out there on the internet. So reputation is a key one. If when a user goes to a given website, we from our SIO sender base operation, we can know immediately the reputation of the site they're visiting. If that is a dodgy, I don't know, a malware site or some sort of financial site located in a dodgy world, we can see maybe that it's got a -8 reputation and immediately block access to that site. If it's a +8 reputation, well, we trust that site and we'll allow the user to go straight to that site. And we use reputation analysis to say invoke a malware scanner when the site is of a sort of intermediate reputation. So it's not a good reputation, but it's something like +2, which is sort of all right, but not that good. In that case, we may invoke malware scanners and scan all return content. And we can use this for encrypted SSL-based sites. So when a user is going off to a financial site, for example, may say, well, we can either decrypt or leave pass through that traffic they're sending to a secure SSL-based site. In the event that it's a site with a bad reputation or an untrusted reputation, something like -1, we'll say, well, yes, you can access this SSL-based site, but we're going to decrypt their content and scan it because the reputation is not good. So we're using reputation to decide whether or not to decrypt traffic which is coming from a user's browser up to an SSL-based website somewhere out there. Level traffic monitor is a way that we can look at traffic that may be bypassing the proxy. so you connected or going out to the internet through the proxy, but you may have a bot present on their endpoint, which is trying to dial home to some command and control center on the internet. And botnets are becoming more sophisticated now, and even the most sort of security conscious organizations are suffering botnets. There's a serious problem with this in many global organizations. Botnets getting through to the user endpoint either through email or through web browsing mechanisms, because the site is not as protected as it should be. In which case, the botnet traffic from the user endpoint may directly go out to the internet and try and bypass the proxy. In which case, we need to be able to see traffic which is also bypassing the proxy. What we basically is taking a couple of dedicated ports on the SC's appliance, and we're making traffic which is passing through a local switch. So when all traffic from users to the internet passes through a local switch, the ION port S-series might not normally get visibility of that, but spanning all that traffic to a dedicated port on the switch, which we then plug into the layer 4 traffic monitor port on the port series, S-series, we can see all that traffic which is going out to the internet, which wouldn't have been touching the proxy normally. So it gives us some confidence against malware, botnet networks, which are potentially going from your users to the outside world and might have been bypassing the proxy. By using this layer 4 traffic monitoring, we can see that traffic, and if a user's endpoint is dialing home to a botnet, we can stop that traffic in its tracks, maybe by doing a TCP reset or an ICMP unreachable command. We can block down that traffic before it gets back out. So again, regaining control over the hackers and blocking botnet activity. From a reputation point of view, as I mentioned earlier, it could be that a user is going to a good site, something like the New York Times shown here, so that would probably give us a good reputation, and the user would be allowed to that site. Maybe they're allowed to look at the category of news sites, allowed to look at this particular site, but the adverts on there, if this site's being compromised, there may be ads, as we can see the H ad on there, which seems legitimate, but if the user clicks on that, that might take them off to a URL because the site's being compromised, and it might send them to a scareware site where they're popped up with an antivirus product and advised to download this useless product, which they have to give their credit card details for, and you fall for these attacks sometimes. So we're going to be highly aware of this. In the case of ION port, we're going to see that the user's clicked on a URL, so we're still going to scan or look at the reputation of the URL that they've been redirected to, and given that in this case it's a -9.3 reputation score, we're going to block that activity. So because a user gets to a site which is good, which is itself being compromised, we're still offering ongoing protection, through the activity they carry out on that compromised site. So again, that's reputation filtering in action. From a malware point of view, we can scan for malware on the web security appliance, both inbound and outbound. So your requests when a user is pushing up information to Facebook, for example, or to a corporate FTP site somewhere, we can scan outbound content, and as we can scan inbound content which users are pulling down from the sites they access. We have a potential to deploy 2 of 3 engines on the appliance. It could be Sophos, McAfee, or WebRoot, 2 of the 3, usually something complementary to what the user may have on their desktop. And these can do parallel scanning. So using this what we call dynamic vectoring and streaming technology, we can push a given piece of returned content through 2 engines simultaneously, and the first one to give a negative output or a bad result will drop the traffic in its flow, and that optimizes the use of the engines and makes, as opposed to scanning going from Sophos to McAfee, vice versa, it gives us an optimized way to scan return traffic. Recently introduced on the web security appliance is adaptive scanning. So we can actually decide, or this is controlled again through SIO, we can see which is best suited to given content. So take into account, what kind of object it is really. So something like PDF from a site with a reputation of 1.1 might be best suited to the Sophos scanner, whereas I don't know, a Flash object might be best suited to the WebRoot scanner. So using the most sort of up-to-date information, which again comes from our security intelligence operation in the cloud, we can have this outbreak intelligence on the appliance, know at any given time which engine is best suited to what type of content, and therefore just push the content through one engine and see if we get a positive or a negative outcome. So again, use adaptive scanning and has also minimized greatly